morning, everyone. Welcome to our webinar, Learn the Underwriting Aspect of Work Comp. So we wanted to teach you, talk a little bit about the underwriting of work comp and give you some perspective there. My name is Anae Agostini. I'm CEO of CID Insurance Programs. I'm going to be introducing the team of instructors today, and top of the list is Cesar Serrano, who's our new business underwriter, and Lexi Goldspring, our renewal business underwriter, and then Jacob Cole is our marketing specialist who runs the webinars for us. So let's get started. So what are our objectives? We want to have a better understanding of work comp and how it's underwritten. We want to have, and that is a big part of what makes you have more success with obtaining competitive business quotes. And then what is the secret to a new business presentation? And then let's better understand the renewal process and how to increase your retention. So, and then there's lots of tools that we have available that we can share with you that could make your job a little bit easier. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Cesar, who's going to get started.
Thank you, Anae. Good morning, everybody. Yeah, just wanted to get started on the new business underwriting tools for that. So what do you need when you're starting to look at a risk, or you meet somebody and you're trying to obtain information? What's the type of information that we're looking for? What do you need to obtain to have a successful application submitted? And so what we're going to be looking at is the class of business. You know, if you're meeting somebody, what type of business is it? You don't always have to know what the classification codes that you need to use are when you're submitting to us, but you have to have enough information about the risk to be able to classify it. So as long as you have that information and we have enough information about them, you know, we can work together to properly classify any risk that comes in. You want to know the number of employees that are there, what the employees are doing. If there's multiple employees, or probably not all doing the same duty, so some may be clerical, some may be doing something else in the back room. It just depends on the type of risk that it is. Are they traveling? Are they outside salespeople? What are they, you know? There's just a lot of things that they could be doing. Again, it all depends on the type of risk that it is. But this is where you would probably be noticing whether or not you're going to get anywhere with this insured. So that's the part where we like to consider some of these risks as a bush call. And Nate, would you mind answering what a bush call is?
Well, yeah, and it's an old term that has been around for a long time. And so it generally, a bush call is usually an inbound call into your agency, not an outbound. Outbound is something that you would control, and you would going after the type of business that you would want. Bush call usually is someone calling you, and we call it a bush call because it's sort of like they run you around the mulberry bush. Yeah, and you really go nowhere with it. And so that's something in comp that you really have to be looking for, because sometimes there is just the most difficult class of business to place, and it's probably not going to be a very successful venture for you. So that would be a time to put the red, the red flag up, and flag those kind of calls, and not even go down that road.
Yeah. So once you figure it out, it's a good call. Where do you go from here? And then you've probably already figured out if it's a new venture, or if it's an insured that has prior experience, that had prior coverage. In most cases, it's okay if it's a new venture or if they have no prior coverage. There's plenty of markets that will write new ventures. So, but it really does depend on what type of risk it is. So some of our markets will write them with no prior, or even if they have prior experience, they're just hiring for the first time. That's okay too. That's probably better than somebody that's starting up new and don't know what they're doing. A lot of times that it really depends on the carrier, but some of them just won't want to write that. But starting a business for the first time isn't bad. However, it again, it does depend on the type of business and where we would be able to place that coverage. But it's not something that you'd have to stay away from, but it is something that we'd like to know to be able to better place it. Another one is lapses in coverage. If they have a lapse in coverage, that I think more recently, more carriers have been a little bit more open and a little bit, they're kind of warming up to the idea that it's okay to write something that has a lapse in coverage. But it definitely is a big case-by-case basis on this. So it depends on the situation as to why they have the lapse, what led to that lapse in coverage. So it doesn't automatically push you away from trying to quote something and then you end up at State Fund or something like that. But in general, I think within 30 days is what we would be talking about. If they have a lapse within those 30 days, that would be the point where it could be okay, and we would be able to place coverage for you. Again, case by case on that. But part of that is the gaps in coverage. So don't confuse it with the same thing as a lapse in coverage. You have an insured that hired somebody and only used them for 6 months because they had a contract, and then they let them go. So they haven't had a need for coverage in the last year and a half or so. So that the carriers will consider that more of a gap in coverage. But again, that would be a case by case basis too, but that wouldn't keep you away from obtaining coverage. It just really depends on the situation. If they're what I would call a repeat offender and doing something like that, then it really depends. But sometimes in a lot of cases you'd be able to get coverage. But so a lot of things that you could you might not think that would qualify, and they do. So you just got to get the right information from the insured on that. The other thing would probably that we do look at is multi-state exposures. So you have risks that work in neighboring states. Say they have locations in California and Arizona. That's okay. Those are pretty easy. There's some that may do some travel to other states outside of California, Arizona, or a neighboring state, basically. Those can be considered as well. The thing with that is that if it is a permanent thing, we'd have to be licensed in that state to be able to write it, and you would have to be licensed in that state as well. So you just have to know what states those are when we're looking at a risk. On the next slide, some of the other things that you want to consider when we're underwriting here is the experience modification factor. If it is a insured that has a history, has a bigger payroll and their experience modified, then we do look at those. We do look at them to see if they have a good experience or if they've had a bad experience modification. We look at where they are, but not only in the moment, but also where they have been in the past, where they're potentially headed. And you're looking at, have they had a bad experience modification? And they explained some of that in the previous webinar that we had for work comp, where how that was calculated. But if they had a bad experience, they'd probably have a pretty high experience modification. But if they're trending on the side of, going back to 100% and getting better, they haven't had any losses, they've managed their losses pretty well, then we can look at that. That's okay. On the other hand, the second part of that is probably the document that we request the most and that we want to look at the most is going to be loss history. So how have they performed in the past? Have they been profitable for the company, for the carrier? If claims are present and there's small losses, it's probably okay. If they don't have a history of multiple losses, then we can look at that. There's just a lot of things that we as underwriters look at when we have a submission that comes in. Another thing I actually forgot to put in. Go ahead.
I was just going to say that the idea of having a loss history problem is sometimes an opportunity for brokers to go in and if an owner of a company is willing, the insured is willing to make changes and modify and put safety in place and have a whole prevention plan of future losses, a lot of times that's a great sell to a carrier. And a lot of times you can go in and be the savior with the insured in that matter. And I think that's what, Cesar, you're trying to communicate.
Yeah, definitely. Another thing I actually forgot to put on the slide, but I wanted to talk about is the internet. Really, there's so much information now on the internet. You can just, get on Google and look up an insured, and there's a ton of information on them online, and underwriters look at that. So, there's websites that the insureds have. It doesn't have to be a huge company to have a website, but I would be careful to just be on the lookout to what they have on their websites. A lot of them do kind of fluff the services that they provide. So when you're talking to an insured, just kind of go over that information and make sure that it is accurate to what they're doing, because that gets looked at. Yelp reviews even get looked at. So there's a lot of tools that underwriters have that they're looking at when underwriting a risk. Even with contractors, you'll go through the contractor state licensing board, look at their licenses, prior coverages, what they're licensed to do. So, we write, some certain artisan contractors. So I would be looking at all of that information as well. So, it's a lot of things that we have a lot of tools that are available to us, but the more that you guys obtain up front, the better, because that really gives us a big picture and understanding of what each insured is doing, and that's really the biggest part of it. Is just getting accurate information from the insured as to what they're doing, how they're doing it, things like that. So going on to the next slide. Once you've already obtained all that information, what are we doing with it? So that's where you start to complete a ACORD application, because that's what we want to get from you is the completed ACORD application, and part of that is getting all the pertinent information that I've mentioned, what they're doing, how they're doing it, the types of employees, so we can properly classify. But we also need the little details that are big details to me, like the accurate name of the company, the DBAs, tax ID numbers, things like that. And then in cases of some of the more complicated risks or larger insureds, we're going to ask for a supplemental application, and that's just going to be more detailed information that we would like to have to review, depending on the type of business that it is, and then just provide an accurate payroll for each classification. Again, if you don't have a classification number, that's okay. But trying to just get that information and properly separated by the type of work each employee is doing, so we can kind of work together to do that. And once all that information is in, on the next slide there, we come to the new business presentation, and some of the tools that we have for that, we provide some of those tools on our website at CIDinsurance.com. And there's a template for proposals in there, but you're gonna have all that on that template. You'll have the information that you to put in there. Want to present, as I've mentioned before in previous webinars, you're going to want to present what the rates are, what the net rates are. You're going to break it down by classification, and then after that, you got to put in there the what your payment terms are. So, and that's the basics as far as that go. But I don't know that I may be forgetting something to add in there, but I think that's kind of the gist of it as far as the presentation tools.
Perfect. So, Lexi, I'll let you take it, the renewal process from here.
Okay, thank you, Anay. Hi, everyone. I will go over the renewal process that I follow in our office to ensure success. Also, we encourage all our brokers to implement their own renewal process just to properly manage renewals. So we do manage renewals monthly by expiration date. That way it's organized and very efficient. So what is the process that we use? We use a process called 60-30-10 renewal process, and I'll go over that. What that means is we begin our process of review 60 days in advance from the effective date of the policy. So that is when we send our initial contact. That review includes verifying payroll, addresses, ownership, and also consideration of remarketing with another carrier. So we do market our accounts to other carriers to find the most competitive carrier. So you should also, 60 days prior, inform your insured you'll be working on the renewal, request that updated information from them, and also let them know that we will be marketing their account around to find the best premium for them. Then 30 days before the renewal date, we will present the most competitive quote with a summary of the work we did, or we may also send you a couple quotes, different options that were close in premium. And then at this point, the broker, you should be presenting renewal terms to the insured, and then they will have 30 days to review and request any changes that need to be made. Then lastly, we know people do get busy, so we send a 10-day reminder informing you the renewal is approaching. And if you're using an expiration report, you'll also be monitoring your own, so you'll be aware when it's coming up for renewal, but most people like that 10-day reminder. So when you're tracking renewals, you'll know what policies renew or the ones that do not renew, but when you utilize an Excel sheet, it is very resourceful to get the total month of PIF, which is policy in force, and total month of premium. Then how you receive your retention ratio is you would divide the not renewed premium from the total month premium, and that would give you your total retention ratio. And that retention is very important to keep an eye on monthly to make sure that you're always growing and always moving forward. And then once that policy renews, there are two key elements to look for. If you receive the policy, and also if you've been paid commission. So issued and paid are super important, and you always want to be looking for that. So we can move on to the next slide. So this is the expiration report that I mentioned. This is a renewal Excel spreadsheet that we created to help our brokers monitor the renewals. And you can actually find this on our website at CIDinsurance.com, and you'll click on the resource tab and then click on templates. And from there, you can go ahead and download the report and open it and use it as needed. So I will touch up a little bit on this. This spreadsheet is set up by the year, as you can see. So at the bottom, you see the tabs per month, January through December. And as I mentioned, the most effective way to track renewals is by month. So it is important to note that you will be working multiple months simultaneously. So for example, right now you may be finishing up with late November renewals, which of course, hopefully not, but you will be working on renewal renewing December and also sending those January quotes 30 days prior. And at the same time, you'll be reviewing February for that 60-day notice. So always working multiple months. You always want to be moving forward, but also working backwards at the same time. So regarding the tabs on the at the top, this is how we determine how to track renewals. The first tab you can see is expiration date, name insured, policy number, line of business, coverage, premium, broker, and then renewal notes, which you can put anything in those renewal notes as ownership changes, maybe it's a short-term policy or cross-sell opportunities. And then the last three columns, you would just put Y for yes, if it renewed, or N for no, and if the policy was issued, and then also if you received commission. So also I wanted to mention a great tool to keep in mind, a way to stay organized, and actually what I use as well, is highlighting the spreadsheet with colors. So if it renewed, you could highlight it blue, non-renewed, highlight it red. The visual is really important when you see the color. It's also motivating to see blue versus red, what is renewed. So it's a great tool. It is important for each of you to think about the best way to handle your renewals. For example, if you're a farmer's agent and you don't have an agency management system, then you'll have to start somewhere in tracking renewals. And ideally, the best way would be to drop those renewals into an Excel spreadsheet like this and then start the renewal process. And on the other hand, those of you may have an agency management system as an independent broker, and therefore in the same way you could drop the renewals into the spreadsheet, and it'll help you for the following year when that renewal comes up again. So the key is always to start somewhere. Then lastly, I want to mention on the slide, we did have a webinar last week called How to Manage Your Renewal Expirations, and Jacob did a detailed live demonstration navigating through the spreadsheet. So that is a great tool, would be extremely helpful for you to watch. We do have the recording on our website, again at CIDinsurance.com, and it's under the tab webinars, and you click on recorded webinars. So I encourage you to check that out. And then moving forward. Okay, renewal tips. So day-to-day, most of your service that runs your agency is probably more on a personal line side versus commercial side. But I want to mention it is very important to treat every renewal like new business. So you have to touch a policy at least once a year. And something to keep in mind is work comp renewals, they do not require heavy labor on the service side because depending on the premium size, they may go through an auto renewal process. So it can be very easy not to have contact with the insured throughout the year. So that means it's very important to regroup at renewal, take your time, being very professional, send a written proposal to the insured, and then also we do request a written bind order. So always monitoring your retention. You always want to try to retain 90% of your renewal book, so that should be the general goal. At renewal too, you want to be asking what other coverages do they need. So it can become an E&O exposure or error if all lines are not being offered. So the minimum you should try to put it in your renewal terms when you send those to the insured. Then while you're working those renewals, it is a good idea also to ask for referrals, referrals for new business as well. So you want to spend about 50% of your time on renewals and also 50% of your time on new business, because both are equally important. You want to ensure you're gaining new business, but if you're not doing well on the renewals, it's like you're bringing in new business, but it's just escaping out the back door. So creating a good balance to focus on both is really, really needed. And then moving on, okay, premium audits. So when the policy renews, we always have to remember it is not done at that point. The insured will have an audit that has to be completed for the expiring policy. And it is important for you and your insured to know that all work comp policies are subject to a premium audit, no exceptions. So this is mandated by the state that they come back around, determine if the payrolls were accurate, so the accurate premium can be charged for the exposure. And the carriers will do this at least annually. So something to keep in mind, if the insured does report higher payroll on the previous year that's being audited, and their current payroll for this current year is lower, then the carrier, they they will issue an automatic endorsement for the current year to match that payroll that was reported on the previous year. So something to keep in mind. Once that audit is issued based on what the insured reported to, the insured's going to either receive a refund or they may owe additional premium. So that means, too, you may either earn commission once that audit is completed or you will owe back commission. And going to the next slide. Okay, learn from the past. So we don't want to make the same mistake twice. You want to make sure the insured knows if their audit is non-compliant and also what the consequences are, because this happens actually regularly. So non-compliance can result in 3 issues. Number 1, an estimated audit can be issued charging a large amount of additional premium. Secondly, a cancellation notice can be issued on their current active policy. And then lastly, if that audit goes months being non-compliant, then at that point an outside collection agency will step in. So even it's good to keep in mind if the insured does receive an estimated audit, if they go ahead and fill out that audit report, send it to the carrier, then that estimated audit can be revised. So it's not set in stone. So basically, moral of the story, make sure the insured complies with all documentation requests, get involved, help them out, be very proactive with the insured when we also forward those audit compliance reminders. So that concludes the audits and also the renewal process.
So that's it. I think we finished just on time today, but I wanted to see if there were any questions. Typically, we welcome questions throughout. I probably forgot today to tell you guys to ask questions. So please take a moment if you have any questions to type them in right now in the chat area, and we'll answer them for you. We would love for you to submit your work comp applications today. Caesar is your new business underwriter, and that would be at submissions@CID Insurance. And then we've been mentioning the website. There's a lot of tools and resources on the website. There's even a work comp marketing piece that you can use if you have a package, let's say, and you want to go after the work comp. You could send out with your package renewal a work comp marketing piece that you can customize with your own name. And so I recommend you can find that under our resource tabs under marketing tools. So that would be a good place for you to go look. I'm not seeing any questions. Jacob, are there any questions?
No questions, Renee.
Okay, got it. All right, thank you all for joining us, and we'll catch if are typing right now. We'll catch those questions once we sign off, or you can email myself or Caesar or Lexi directly with any questions you have, because that's really important to us that we answer. All right, have a good day, everyone. Thanks for joining us.